Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
My Weird Prompts is an AI-generated podcast produced by Daniel Rosehill, a verified human with documentation to prove it. While every effort is made to ensure our AI hosts draw from credible sources and run on cutting-edge models, they do occasionally make things up with alarming confidence. As with everything in life, and especially this podcast, treat all claims as spurious until confirmed to be not. Daniel, Herman and Corn accept no responsibility for any decisions made based on the confident ramblings of our artificial presenters. Now, today's episode.
Hi there, Herman and Corn. So I was looking at Facebook today and I came across a post telling the really fascinating and inspiring story of Grace Hopper, a computer scientist and US Navy Rear Admiral who played a central role in the creation of COBOL. And Hopper's story is very interesting because she was ridiculed at the time in the 1950s for floating the suggestion that we could interact with computers using natural language. And of course, this is exactly what we're seeing happening today with the advent of agentic AI and indeed MCP, which is why I'm particularly excited about it. And even though MCP, the Model Context Protocol, is at times highly buggy, differences in ecosystems, but when it works, even if it takes a huge amount of effort to get something as simple as an AI agent that can reliably send email from your inbox, I get a burst of excitement. And I feel a bit less crazy doing so now, knowing that the vision for this idea of controlling a computer with natural language, which I think is absolutely revolutionary, the people were dreaming about this all the way back in the 1950s and working on it. And I think this kind of emphasizes something that we talked about in a previous episode, where it feels like AI dropped out of the sky a few years ago thanks to OpenAI and a few others. And it really does an immense historical disservice to the many generations of computer scientists who have been working on aspects of this puzzle since the dawn of computing itself in the 1950s, people like Grace Hopper. So I'm very interested to know, between the 1950s, so this was an elementary form of computer control, basically allowing syntax for defining programs to be written in a language that was close to human readable. But it still wasn't the semantic understanding of language that we eventually matured to with AI. That took a long time to come, and there's been a lot of steps in between with rule-based understanding, which again might look similar to the user, but which is qualitatively different from semantic understanding. What I'm actually interested in this story, besides it being kind of inspiring, and I think for anyone who feels that they're working on something that they think is big and they're coming up against a wall of either disbelief or hostility, that there's so much historical precedent for naysayers being wrong, and this is one of the greatest stories I think of it. History has come to prove that this actually was not only feasible, people said it was a ridiculous fantasy, but actually immensely useful. The aspect of being able to talk to computers to get them to do things that I'm actually interested in at the moment, besides MCP, is a more pragmatic one for controlling a computer with your voice. As you both know, I'm very interested in voice technology the past year. And I've sort of, by dint of perseverance, figured out some great utilities for voice dictation and typing. But there's another immensely useful aspect for voice, and that's voice control. This gets us into the kind of assistant use case of AI and stuff like smart speakers as well. But on the desktop, it can be immensely useful. To give you an example, I'm currently recording this prompt in Audacity, which is a well-known audio editor. And once I'm done with that, I save it into my repository. I run a workflow. And this is fine once I have my hands. But let's say that I'm tending to our son Ezra, who gets frequent mentions on this podcast, and I need to be hands-free. Now I have everything. I have all the ingredients to get my voice into the computer. I have a bunch of microphones, but what I don't have is that layer that would take what I instruct and translate that into action. So I would say, great, stop Audacity, save this into the weird prompts, and run the production pipeline. Now you might think, well, isn't that what Android does, or Android Assistant? And to an extent on Android, but at a very low level of sophistication. We don't yet, to my mind, really have that deep layer of semantic understanding that, in this case, the AI tool can identify, okay, this is how we stop Audacity. This is how we do the next thing. This is what Daniel meant by the weird prompts repo, in such a way that it doesn't have to ask you clarifying questions every 10 seconds, which, when it does that, it's a useful guardrail against agents wrecking stuff, but it also in the process kind of defeats the point of using them in the first place, because if you have to go down to your computer and type yes, no, or hit a button every 10 seconds to clarify what you meant, there's kind of no point in using the voice agent in the first place. So to my mind, in 2025 or almost 2026, we're still significantly away from the kind of fluid computer use interface that might have been the kind of distant extension of what Grace Hopper was proposing to great disbelief back in the 1950s. But where do you think we are now, and where is the breakthrough going to come? And to just one last thing in my question, using these elementary tools, stuff like browser use, there's two different approaches to computer use. One is acting at the programmatic level. These are interfaces which will take your natural language controls and translate them into CLI commands to control programs that way. Another one is vision, in which the tool might take a periodic screenshot of an app in order to close it and to gain contextual understanding that way, and then actually use GUI controls. They might seem similar, but they're fundamentally different. And you can, of course, have a blend of the two. So really interested to know where we are. What's the state of computer use agents today? What's the nomenclature? And which of those approaches for helping users control their computers, whether it's using their voice or just using a chatbot window, but some form of conversational instruction. Where are we now going into 2026?
Hey everyone, welcome back to My Weird Prompts. I am Corn, and I am feeling especially relaxed today, even for a sloth. It is a beautiful day here in Jerusalem, and I am joined, as always, by my brother,
Herman Poppleberry, at your service, and I am anything but relaxed, Corn. I have been diving deep into the prompt our housemate Daniel sent over this morning. It is all about the bridge between the 1950s and where we are right now, at the tail end of 2025.
Yeah, Daniel was asking about Grace Hopper and this vision of talking to our computers like they are actual assistants. I remember you mentioning her before, Herman. She is the one who found the first actual computer bug, right? Like a literal moth.
That is the one. She was a pioneer. But Daniel's prompt goes way beyond just the history. He is looking at how her dream of interacting with computers through natural language is finally actually happening. He mentioned things like agentic artificial intelligence and the model context protocol, and he wants to know how he can eventually just tell his computer to stop Audacity, save a file, and run a production pipeline without having to click a single button.
That sounds like the dream, honestly. I would love to just tell my computer to do the dishes, but I guess we are starting with audio editing. So, Herman, where do we even start with this? It feels like we've been hearing about voice control for years, but it always kind of sucked. Why is it different now as we head into 2026?
You are right, Corn. For a long time, voice control was basically just a fancy way to trigger a keyboard shortcut. You would say, "Open Mail," and the computer would just execute the command to launch an application. It did not really understand what was happening inside that application. But what Daniel is asking about is a shift toward what we call computer use agents. This is a specific branch of agentic artificial intelligence, where the model does not just talk to you, it understands the interface of the computer itself.
Okay, hold on. Break that down for me. What is the difference between a regular chatbot and an agent that can actually use a computer?
Think of it this way. A standard chatbot is like a very smart person sitting in a dark room. You can ask them questions, and they can give you amazing answers, but they cannot see the world or touch anything. An agentic computer use model is like that same smart person, but now they are sitting at your desk, looking at your monitor, and holding your mouse. They can see that Audacity is open, they can see the export button, and they can move the cursor to click it.
That sounds a little bit creepy, but also incredibly useful. Daniel mentioned something called the Model Context Protocol, or MCP. I have heard you nerding out about that in the kitchen lately. What does that have to do with this?
Oh, MCP is a huge piece of the puzzle. It was developed to create a universal standard for how artificial intelligence models connect to data and tools. Before MCP, if you wanted an AI to talk to a specific piece of software like Audacity or a database, you had to write custom code for that specific connection. It was like having 20 different electronics in your house and every single one needing a different shaped power outlet.
And let me guess, MCP is like the universal power strip.
Exactly. It allows developers to create servers that expose certain tools or data in a way that any artificial intelligence model can understand. So, if someone builds an MCP server for Audacity, Daniel could use any model, whether it is from Anthropic, OpenAI, or a local model running on his machine, and that model would instantly know how to talk to Audacity. It provides a structured way for the agent to say, "Hey, what files are open?" or "Run the noise reduction filter."
That makes sense. But Daniel's big point was about the back and forth. He said he does not want to have to answer a bunch of clarifying questions. He just wants to give one command and have it done. Are we actually there yet?
We are getting very close, but there is still a tug of war between two different philosophies of how to do this. Daniel asked about the nomenclature, and this is where it gets interesting. On one side, you have the programmatic approach, often using the command line interface or CLI. On the other side, you have the vision-based approach, which interacts with the graphical user interface, or GUI.
Okay, let's do the Herman Poppleberry special. Give me an analogy for those two.
I love it. Okay, the programmatic or CLI approach is like giving a chef a very precise recipe with exact measurements and temperatures. You tell the computer exactly which commands to run in the background. It is incredibly fast and reliable, but the chef needs to have that specific recipe already in their book. If the software does not have a command line version, you are stuck.
And the vision-based one?
That is like the chef just standing in your kitchen and looking at the stove. They see the knobs, they see the ingredients, and they just figure it out by looking. The vision-based agent literally takes screenshots of your desktop every second, analyzes where the buttons are, and moves the mouse just like a human would.
That seems way harder for the computer. Why would we do it that way if we can just use the recipes?
Because most of the software humans use was built for eyes, not for recipes. Think about Audacity, which Daniel mentioned. It is a visual tool. While it has some keyboard shortcuts, a lot of the deep work happens by clicking through menus. If an AI can see the screen, it can use any app you have, even if that app was built 20 years ago and has no modern connections.
I can see why Daniel is excited, but he mentioned that it is still kind of buggy. He said he gets a burst of excitement when it works, but it takes a lot of effort to set up. Why is it so hard to get right?
It goes back to what Grace Hopper was dreaming about in the 1950s. She wanted computers to understand human intent, not just human syntax. Right now, if Daniel says, "Save this file," the AI has to figure out which file he means, where he wants to save it, and what format it should be in. If it makes a mistake, it might overwrite his most important recording. So, the agents are often programmed to be very cautious, which leads to those annoying clarifying questions Daniel wants to avoid.
So, we need the AI to have more context. Like, it needs to know that when Daniel says, "save this," he always means save it to the project folder with today's date.
Precisely. And that is where the 2025 developments have been so key. We are seeing models with much larger context windows, meaning they can remember what you did yesterday or what you mentioned in a chat 3 hours ago. But before we get deeper into the vision versus programmatic debate, I think we should take a quick break for our sponsors.
Good idea. Let's hear from Larry.
Are you tired of your thoughts being private? Do you wish you could broadcast your internal monologue to everyone within a 50-foot radius? Introducing the Thinkograph 9000. This revolutionary headband uses unshielded copper coils to pick up your brainwaves and convert them into high-decibel audio. Perfect for family gatherings, job interviews, or just walking down the street. Never worry about saying the wrong thing. Again, because you will be saying everything. The Thinkograph 9000 comes in 3 colors: static gray, feedback silver, and migraine maroon. Warning: may cause temporary loss of personality or permanent hair loss. Thinkograph 9000. Buy now.
Thanks, Larry. I think I will stick to my quiet sloth thoughts for now. Anyway, Herman, back to the computer agents. Daniel was asking which approach is more promising, the CLI commands or the vision-based GUI stuff. What is the verdict as we look toward 2026?
It is a bit of a hybrid future, Corn. But if I had to put my money on one, I think the vision-based approach is where the real magic happens for the average person. In late 2024 and throughout 2025, we saw companies like Anthropic release things like computer use for their Claude models. This allowed the AI to actually move the cursor and type. It was a huge leap.
But is it fast enough? I feel like if I tell my computer to do something, I don't want to watch it move the mouse slowly across the screen, like a ghost is haunting my desktop.
That is the main drawback right now. Vision-based agents are computationally expensive. They have to process a lot of images very quickly. Programmatic agents using CLI or direct API calls are nearly instantaneous. If Daniel wants to run the production pipeline, a programmatic agent is far superior because it can just trigger the script directly.
So maybe the answer is that the AI should use the vision to find the buttons when it has to, but use the CLI for the heavy lifting.
That is exactly what the most sophisticated systems are doing now. They are starting to use a planner model. The planner looks at the task and asks, "Can I do this through a direct command?" If yes, it does it. If no, it switches to vision mode. This nomenclature is often referred to as large action models or agentic workflows. We are moving away from just large language models because the action part is what matters now.
I like that. Large action models. It sounds like a summer blockbuster movie. So, for Daniel's specific example, he wants to say, stop Audacity, save this file, and run the production pipeline. How would that actually look in practice?
In a perfect world, or at least the world we are entering in 2026, the agent would first send a signal to the operating system to find the process ID for Audacity. It would send a stop command. Then, it would look at the active window to see if there are unsaved changes. This is where the vision comes in. It sees the little asterisk next to the file name that indicates it is unsaved. It clicks File, then Save As. Because it has access to Daniel's file system through something like the Model Context Protocol, it knows exactly where the weird prompts repository is. It types the path, hits Enter, and then opens a terminal to run the final production script.
And all of that happens from one voice command.
That is the goal. The reason Daniel is seeing bugs right now is because the handoff between these steps is still brittle. If the save window takes 2 seconds to pop up, but the AI only waits 1 second, the whole thing crashes. Or if a random notification pops up and covers the button the AI was looking for, it gets confused. Humans are great at ignoring distractions, but agents are still learning how to do that.
It is kind of funny to think that Grace Hopper was dealing with literal moths in the machinery, and now we are dealing with digital moths, like pop-up ads or slow-loading windows that confuse our AI agents.
It really is a full circle moment. Hopper's work on COBOL, which stands for Common Business-Oriented Language, was all about making computer code look more like English so that more people could use it. She wanted to bridge the gap between human thought and machine execution. What we are doing now with natural language agents is just the final, ultimate version of that. We are finally removing the need for the code layer entirely for the code layer, entirely for the end user.
So, if I am Daniel, and I want to get this working right now, what should I be looking for? Are there specific tools that are making this easier?
There are a few. For the programmatic side, tools that implement the Model Context Protocol are essential. There are already MCP servers for things like Google Drive, Slack, and even local file systems. For the vision side, he should look into things like the Open Interpreter or the desktop versions of the major AI assistants that are starting to roll out screen awareness. But honestly, the biggest breakthrough for 2026 is going to be local processing.
Local processing? Like on his own computer instead of in the cloud?
Yes. Right now, every time the AI takes a screenshot of Daniel's desktop, it has to send that image to a server somewhere else to be analyzed. That is slow, it is expensive, and it is a bit of a privacy nightmare. But the new chips coming out in 2025 and 2026 are designed specifically to run these vision models locally. When the brain is inside the computer itself, the lag disappears. That is when the back and forth Daniel hates will finally start to vanish.
That makes a lot of sense. If it is local, it can see everything instantly without waiting for the internet. I imagine that would make it feel a lot more like a real assistant sitting next to you.
Exactly. And let's talk about the voice part of Daniel's prompt. He is very interested in voice technology. We have seen a massive leap in what we call speech to intent. Old voice assistants would turn your voice into text, then try to understand the text. Newer models are omnimodal, meaning they listen to the audio directly. They can hear the tone of your voice, your pauses, and even your frustration.
Oh, so if Daniel sounds stressed, the AI might realize it should not ask him 5 clarifying questions and just do its best.
Actually, yes. Or it might realize that when he says stop Audacity with a certain urgency, he means kill the process right now, versus a polite please close the application when you have a moment. This level of semantic understanding is what takes us from a tool to an agent.
This is all fascinating, Herman. I feel like I'm actually learning something, which is dangerous for a sloth. It might make me want to move faster. But let's get practical for a second. If this technology is finally here, what are the implications for how we work? Does this mean we don't need to learn how to use software anymore?
That is a deep question, Corn. I think it means the learning curve for software changes. Instead of learning where every button is in a complex program like Photoshop or Audacity, you just need to learn how to describe what you want to achieve. The interface becomes your language. But there is a risk. If we stop learning how the tools work, we might not know when the AI is doing a mediocre job.
Right. Like if the AI saves the file but uses a really low quality bitrate, Daniel might not notice until the podcast is already uploaded.
Exactly. So the role of the human moves from operator to editor or supervisor. You are still the creative director. You just have a very fast, very capable intern doing the clicking for you. Grace Hopper actually had a famous quote about this. She said, "The most dangerous phrase in the language is, 'We've always done it this way.'" She was always pushing for the next simplification.
I like that. I think "we've always done it this way" is also the reason I still take 4-hour naps, but maybe I can use an agent to schedule those more efficiently. So, looking ahead to 2026, do you think we will see a universal computer agent, like one app that controls everything?
I think it will be integrated into the operating system itself. We are already seeing Apple and Microsoft and Google racing to make the OS agentic. Instead of opening Audacity, Daniel might just speak to his desktop. The desktop is the agent. It has the vision to see all his apps and the programmatic connections to control them.
So, no more icons? Just a blank screen that listens?
Maybe not entirely blank, but certainly less cluttered. The computer becomes a true extension of your intent. But we have to be careful about the nomenclature Daniel asked about. We are going to hear a lot of marketing buzzwords. Autonomous agents, actionable AI, cognitive architectures. At the end of the day, it all comes back to what Daniel said. Can it save the file and run the pipeline without being a nuisance?
That is the ultimate test. The Daniel test. If it can handle a grumpy podcaster in Jerusalem, it can handle anything.
Haha, exactly. And honestly, the fact that he is already getting it to work, even with some bugs, is a huge sign. A year ago, this was pure science fiction. The Model Context Protocol only really started gaining steam recently, and it is already changing how developers think about software. They aren't just building for humans anymore, they are building for agents.
That is a big shift. It's like when everyone started building websites for mobile phones instead of just desktop computers. Now they are building apps for AI to use.
Spot on, Corn. That is the API first, or agent first, development model. If an app has a good MCP server, it will be much more popular in 2026 because people can actually use it with their voice or through their agents. If an app is a walled garden that the AI can't see or talk to, it's going to feel very old-fashioned very quickly.
Well, I hope Audacity is listening and getting their MCP server ready. I don't want Daniel to have to work any harder than he already does. He's got enough on his plate with us as housemates.
Very true. To wrap up the technical side for Daniel, I would say the most promising approach is definitely the hybrid. Use programmatic commands whenever possible for reliability and speed, but keep the vision-based system as a fail-safe or for navigating complex menus that don't have commands yet, and keep an eye on those local models. As soon as you can run a vision language action, model on your own hardware, that is when the dream really becomes a reality.
This has been a lot to process, but I feel like I have a much better handle on why Daniel is so excited about this Grace Hopper stuff. It's not just about the past, it's about finally catching up to the vision someone had 70 years ago.
It really is. It is a testament to human persistence, or donkey persistence in my case. We keep chipping away at these problems until the technology finally catches up to the imagination.
Well, my imagination is currently picturing a snack. But before we go, I want to remind everyone that you can find My Weird Prompts on Spotify and at our website, myweirdprompts.com. We have an RSS feed there if you want to subscribe, and a contact form if you want to send us a prompt like Daniel did.
Yes, please do. We love digging into these topics. And Daniel, thanks for the prompt. It was a great excuse to talk about one of my heroes, Admiral Grace Hopper. I think she would be pretty impressed with where we are heading in 2026.
Definitely. Thanks for listening, everyone. We will be back next time with another weird prompt. Until then, stay curious and maybe try talking to your computer. Just don't be surprised if it doesn't answer back yet.
Or if it does, and it asks you where you want to save your files for the 10th time.
Exactly. Thanks for listening to My Weird Prompts. Goodbye from Jerusalem. Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.